Corporate tax credits problem 1. Jalapeno Corporation's marginal tax rate is 10% and Habanero Corporation's marginal tax rate is 21%. If both corporations are entitled to a $5,700 deduction, how much tax savings will the deduction generate for each corporation? If both corporations are entitled to a $5,700 tax credit, how much tax savings will the credit generate for each corporation? Assume that each corporation's pre-credit tax exceeds $5,700. This problem is actually really simple. It's really just showing you the distinction between a deduction, $5,700 deduction, and a tax credit, where you have different corporations with credits versus deduction and different marginal rates. So Jalapeno has a marginal tax rate of 10%. That's going to be really important. The Habanero Corporation has a marginal tax rate of 21%. Now, the first question deals with if the corporations have a $5,700 deduction, how much tax savings will be generated by each corporation? A deduction is not a dollar for dollar reduction in taxes. It is a percentage, and then that number is then reducing the amount of taxes owed or due. So for Jalapeno, and many of you already know this, maybe it's not presented in the same way you would think about it, but that's what we're doing. So for a deduction, what you do is you take the $5,700, so J for Jalapeno, H for Habanero, the $5,700 deduction, and we multiply it by their effective margin, or their marginal rate, their highest rate. You can also think of it as the effective rate if you're given that information, but here the marginal rate, which telling you, okay, that's the next dollar of income, that's what's going to be subject to. So this deduction would offset taxable income, but again, it doesn't offset tax due. So $5,700 times 10%, that means that Jalapeno is going to get a $570 benefit. Because again, if that's a tax rate of 10%, it's going to reduce tax due by $570. For Habanero, it's worth a little bit more. We take the same $5,700, we multiply that by a 21% tax rate, and we're going to get $1,197. So more than double the amount that Jalapeno gets benefit-wise. This is the actual benefit in terms of dollars, the value of the benefit. Now, credits reduce dollar for dollar, so they are much better. So the point of this question is to show you that a credit is much more valuable. Now, a big thing of credits, though, is that they do have limits, but we are told to assume that each corporation's pre-credit tax exceeds $5,700. So the idea there is that tax owed is greater than $5,700. So tax owed is greater than, let me rewrite that. The amount of tax owed before considering this credit is greater than $5,700. Because the way that general rules for corporations work is that if you don't have enough taxes and you have a credit, and let's say it's non-refundable credit, then you're not going to get that money. It's going to be carried over into the future and maybe even limited in the future depending on the rules for certain credits. So for Jalapeno Habanero, you don't care about the tax rates. Because we have $5,700 offset, they both get all $5,700 because remember, a credit is a dollar for dollar reduction in taxes owed, which ultimately that's what you care about. You care about the value of the benefit, the tax benefit. So this is $5,700 in tax benefit. So you're comparing, in this situation, if this was a $5,700 deduction, it'd only be worth $570 to Jalapeno and $1,197 to Habanero because the difference is in tax rates. But if it's a $5,700 credit, then guess what? It's worth $5,700. So notice that big difference. It's a much bigger difference. You're talking $5,200 plus for Jalapeno, and almost $4,500 around there for Habanero, close to $4,500 around that area for Habanero in terms of differences, whether it be a deduction or credit. So that's really all this question is meant to show you, is that with deductions, you got multiplied by the marginal rates. With a credit, there is no limitation in terms of the rate unless you're told there is a limitation, which here we're told there is no respective limitation because there's enough tax owed to actually get the benefit of the credit.